Hey everybody, this is Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. A tragic anniversary is upon us. On August 26, 2021, an ISIS-K suicide bomber killed 13 American service members and 170 Afghan civilians at Karzai International Airport in Kabul, which was in the midst of the disastrous debacle of a withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan at the direction of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Tragic anniversary, Erik, that we mark 3 years since that debacle that took the lives and frankly, the worst attack on Americans since 2011, with 13 souls lost that day. And by the way, the Biden administration and Joe Biden, who famously, when he greeted the remains of our fallen, famously checked his watch to see, when he could leave and, go catch his next home. Donald Trump, of course, has met with the Gold Star families from that tragic day, and they've spoken highly of how sympathetic he has been to them. I just wanted to reflect on this anniversary, get your thoughts about what took place that day with that debacle, and then we'll get into what has taken place in Afghanistan since then.
Thanks, Mark. It is an ugly exclamation point on top of 20 years of failure. And I just also want to point out that no one has actually been accountable for any of it. Not for losing soldiers that day, soldiers and Marines, not for 20 years of failure, trillions of dollars of spending, thousands of American dead, hundreds of thousands of Americans wounded, no accountability, no one's been fired, no one had their pension pulled, all the generals, all the people that were in command are sitting on board seats of universities and hedge funds and defense contractors. There's no shame at all for having led America through abject, complete freaking failure. And until we return to an accountability culture, we're going to have that again and again and again. It just pains me to hear about it. And the Biden administration talked about, well, we're pulling out and we're confident the Afghan government's going to last for at least a year or so. No, it just shows such a detachment from reality. I called it to within 2 weeks of when the government would collapse, and I called it by the previous spring. I knew that the fuel contract for the aircraft was running out, and so I knew the Air Force was going to stop bombing. And that means the Taliban was going to not be afraid of grouping in groups of 50 or 100 or 500, which is going to let them take bigger and bigger cities. And I'm disappointed of the 18 different flag officers that were in command in Afghanistan. No one said, this is bullshit. I need this kind of authority, and we're going to do this differently. All of them just did the same thing as before. And whether they were commanders of Delta Force or JSOC, I don't take anything away from their individual combat skills. But for heaven's sakes, none of them called bullshit. None of them had the courage to call bullshit in the chain of command to say, I demand that we do things differently because I respect my men too much to let them die unnecessarily doing the same stupid thing that we've been doing for the last 20 years, which was literally a replication of the Soviet battle plan. The first 6 months of the Afghan campaign was brilliant. It was special operations personnel leading with locals, truly hunting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. They were off leash. The targeting cycle meant that if you saw enemy, you could go after them within minutes or hours, not days or months. And so the first 6 months, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban were truly running for their lives. And then when the conventional military showed up, and Bagram Air Force Base became a saluting zone, when the big post exchanges and all the McDonald's and Burger Kings and all that other nonsense shows up, everything stopped or slowed to a crawl, and it became a big coalition. And we repeated that for the next 19 and a half years, Mark. And I'm disappointed in myself because I almost got Trump convinced to do a different strategy, a stay behind. People love to disparage contractors. They love veterans, but they love to dish on contractors. I was going to leave a bunch of veteran contractors behind to live with, train with, and fight alongside the their Afghan counterparts to make sure they get paid and fed and resupplied, that they get medevac and close air support, a small stay behind capability, and that program would have cost 1/4 of what Congress allocated just to resettle all the Afghan refugees. So the level of catastrophic failure, of massive fuck up by our government, up and down, from across 3 administrations, 4 actually, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, that none of the deep state DOD leadership ever just said, stop the insanity, let's do something different that will win. And we all, like lemmings, followed along and drove off the cliff. And with, again, the ugly punctuation mark of 13 Americans getting blown up at Abbey Gate because there was tens of thousands of Afghans crushing into the airport. And let me tell you, thousands and thousands and thousands of Afghans that were evacuated by the U.S. then had no business being evacuated. They were just evacuated because they managed to storm onto the airfield and climb into the back of an airplane. That is not a look for a superpower of thousands of people clinging to the sides of your cargo planes as they're taking off. I remember, again, trying to make an early policy change. I specifically said, I want to avoid the helicopter off the rooftop moment like you saw in Saigon in 1975. But we got that in spades.
Evacuation of the embassy.
Exactly. Every enemy sees that and sees a superpower that doesn't know what the hell they're doing anymore, and no military leadership, no one's decisive enough to say, whoa, stop, we're doing this differently, we demand, and no one resigned. No one said, this is dumb, I refuse to go down a dead end. They all just went along to get along, and I just find that unforgivable.
And if there was that outstanding voice, I've always been of the belief that Joe Biden, 7 months into his administration, had enough clarity of mind, enough cognitive skill to know exactly what he was deciding. And I'm of the belief that this is a guy, he's a cranky old SOB who said, don't tell me how to run the military. Don't tell me how to make decisions like this. And even if somebody did want to try something different or be prepared better for this withdrawal, he wouldn't have listened to them. He wouldn't have heard a thing.
Again, we hire flag officers. We pay them a lot of money. They have dozens of personal staff, hundreds of professional planning staffs, and all the rest to deliver results. Did we get results as taxpayers? No, we did not. We got a horrific result. We were, after 20 years, we replaced the Taliban and Al Qaeda with the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Okay, Ayman Zawahiri, the co-founder of Al Qaeda, moved to Kabul by September, 1 month after the United States left. He was living 400 meters from the UK embassy. And we know this because the CIA finally got clearance to kill him the following April, having watched him for months. The Biden administration assured us, there'll be Afghanistan will not be a terror sanctuary. Nonsense. It was a terror sanctuary. The co-founder of Al Qaeda felt comfortable moving there 1 month after we left. And do not believe the lies of the Taliban that they're not accommodating and hosting other terror organizations. It is like a Star Wars bar scene of all the different terror shops that have set up in the camps and the training. And unfortunately, we have not heard the last of Afghanistan. But I pray to God, if the United States ever does anything there again, There is 0.0 place for the conventional military ever in Afghanistan again. Should not be, never should have been in the first place. So I feel terrible for those families that lost loved ones. It's even worse to have your loved one killed or injured in a failed evolution. And again, the only person to have been held accountable for Afghanistan is Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller of the Marine Corps. Why? Because he made some videos and he had the audacity to call bullshit on the military leadership. At that point, he was in charge of the infantry training program at Quantico for the Marine Corps. And, he said, if one of my Marines loses a rifle on the rifle range, they're going to be punished. There is consequences. In the case of Afghanistan, we lost billions and billions of dollars worth of guns, aircraft, artillery, armored vehicles, drones, you name it. Not one officer that was in charge of all of that inventory has been held to account. And so until we have a culture of actual accountability in the military, we should expect very similar results to the debacle that was Afghanistan. And I think as Americans, we should demand and expect more.
And by the way, it was just in recent weeks that the Taliban was flagrantly parading around our military equipment that I paid for and you paid for, that they got from us in that withdrawal 3 years ago, which leads me to ask you this. Of all the terrible decisions that were made around this withdrawal, should we not have kept such a strategic asset as Bagram Air Base? That blows my mind that we wouldn't have, no matter what the plan was for withdrawal, held on to such a strategic asset.
It's another completely idiotic idea that was discarded. Actually, we lost 13. We could have lost thousands because a 2-man or a 4-man Taliban mortar team from any one of the hilltops, of which there's a lot of them surrounding the airport in Kabul, could have mortared the hell out of the entire airfield and caused thousands of casualties and destroyed a whole bunch of cargo aircraft, which are $250, $300 million a piece, at will. So again, we got away very, very lucky compared to what could have been. Of course, they should have held on to Bagram. Of course, again, I offered to President Trump in the summer of 2017 a stay-behind plan that would have cost less than 5% of what the U.S. had been spending, to leave a stay-behind force of contractors to live with, train with, operate with the Afghan forces in exactly the same way that the East India Company had maintained security presence in the area for 250 years. It's not a new idea, just going back to what's worked. And it was Trump. The one time I saw Trump while he was president, in November of 2019, he came up to me and said, "Erik, you were right. I should have listened to you on Afghanistan." I said, "Mr. President, there's still time. We can fix this." But he was never really in charge of his security apparatus. Mattis was a 5-star Marine general. The idiot from Raytheon that became SecDef after him, Mark Esper, again, go along to get along. All of this failure and waste of money hangs around their neck, period. And if it doesn't hang around their neck, where does the responsibility lie? Because it literally goes back to the geniuses of the Bush administration and Obama, and Trump's problem was that he picked the same people that Bush or Obama would have picked to run the military. And that's why we've gotten the same failed results. And again, no accountability. Of course, we can expect the same results.
Well, and I can tell you, he was misled on those appointments throughout most of his administration, and he will not make that mistake again. Even just with the announcement of his transition team the other day, where his two of his sons, Erik and Don Jr., are members of that transition committee for one basic reason, because those mistakes will not be made again. Only America First adherents will be allowed into appointed positions in his next administration. But let me ask you this, Erik. In this time, in this 3 years, Afghanistan has now become a hotbed of terrorist planning and training and development. Let's talk a little bit about that and the threat you think that they pose to American national security moving forward.
Well, any place that terrorists can organize and train and have sanctuary, it becomes extremely dangerous. The 9/11 attacks cost them in 2001 dollars about $500,000, and they planed and trained and organized from there. The fact is, whether it's a dirty bomb, whether it's other drone technology, anytime you give bad people resources and a place to train and practice with them, bad things are going to result. To the point that even Pakistan is regretting their decisions to abet the Taliban, because the Pakistani Taliban have been raising all kinds of mayhem inside of Pakistan itself. And so it's a bad place. I really feel terrible for the Afghan people that got a glimpse of what freedom and a modicum of human rights looks like and feels like, and now they're stuck again. And so I don't think we've heard the last on Afghanistan. I don't know I don't know if the Afghan people are going to sit and just live under Taliban rule forever. So who knows? And stay tuned. But I worry that there are other terror attacks that can originate from Afghanistan, because it is truly a failed and outlaw place now, yet again.
Let's exit on this question, Erik. So it could very well, Afghanistan could very well be the launch of the next major terrorist attack on the United States, such as we saw a 9/11. If we are fortunate enough to have Donald Trump as the 47th president, what would your advice be to him then?
When the U.S. went in after 9/11, it was more along the lines of a Scipio Africanus punitive raid. Okay, Scipio Africanus was a Roman general who was sent by the Roman Senate to smash the Carthaginians. Why? Because Hannibal, a very capable general from Carthage, had rolled all the way across North Africa, across Spain, through France, across the Alps, into Italy with elephants. And he made war on Rome for years, and then he made his way back to Carthage. And the Roman Senate said, enough. And they sent Scipio Africanus, and you didn't hear from the Carthaginians ever again. A punitive style raid to kill enough Taliban that many of the Afghan fields become fertile again is the answer. And again, when we had that amount of pressure on them, they understood American wrath. When we allowed conventional forces and lawyers and all the rest, look, the fact is Afghanistan could be a reasonable country, but a neocon idea of making this strong federal capital with a remake of Jeffersonian democracy, no. Let it be semi-autonomous region, let it be a confederation, fine, but they have to play by rules. And if they step 1 micron off of those rules, they get dead. That's how Afghanistan should be ruled. And I think that's probably the answer it'll have to be going forward.
We have 19 and a half years of a quagmire that should be instructive for us moving forward to demonstrate that the Bush-esque establishment globalist policies are not going to be effective in a place like Afghanistan, and that in a Trump administration, God willing, the lives lost there on this somber anniversary will not be in vain. Last word to you on this, Erik.
There's lots of people that hate our way of life. And as we saw in the 90s, it festered and it festered, and it became a large and significant attack on America. I think solving those kind of problems in a small footprint, a low cost way is all in our interests. Because again, all the tools, all the electronics, the surveillance, the data collection, all those things, all created by big government to try to win in Afghanistan, have all been turned on us back in the United States. Okay, it literally led to the onset, the creation of surveillance capitalism, where your phone is literally a data harvesting point for big tech and big government. And so solving it in an old school way, how would the Roman Empire have done with this? How would the Greeks have done with this? How go back to that approach? Or even better, how would the East India Company have dealt with this? It was mostly about commerce and trade and a little bit about security. They understood consequences. If they had an area that caused big problems, they would go send a hammer. And you have to be willing to use that hammer and leave the lawyers at home. So again, but the problem is all the elites making these decisions are never the ones to send their sons and daughters to have to go clean up the mess. And again, big government loves to spend money, loves the maximum footprint approach, and it all becomes, like the NGO problem, a big negative circular washing machine. So again, finding ways to do this cheaper, smarter, better, and sometimes a bit more severe is the only way this is going to work. Because the Afghans, the Taliban, the idea that whether they're sending suicide bombers and some horrid, family practices, we're not fighting Jeffersonian counterparts. We're fighting people that are used to fighting, that are comfortable fighting. So give them what they want. Give them a fight they will never forget.
Well said, as usual. To our off-leash audience, on this somber anniversary in late August, we just ask you to keep those 13 souls in mind and all those who continue to serve us wearing the uniform. That's it for this segment of Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Don't forget to go to unplugged.com/offleash for your unplugged phone today. Until next time, thanks for joining us.